Hello, salespeople. Welcome to the You've Got Sales podcast. I'm David Revell. This is the third episode, so anybody listening to this, I super appreciate you being here. And hopefully I can give you some useful information today that maybe you haven't heard before that's going to help you at some point in your career, whether now or in the future, because we're going to be talking about how to create the perfect sales resume / CV. I'm just going to call it a CV just so it's easier for me. Rather than saying both every single time. They have both the same exact functionality and they're the same in every single way. This is the second part of how to create the perfect sales CV. Part one, if you have not listened to it yet, check it out. It's about the content that needs to be within the sales CV, so the responsibilities and the achievements. And this, number two, is going to be about the structure and the template and anything visual that will help you convert applications into interviews. Why should you listen to me about this? Well, I started CV Champion 18 months ago, which is a sales CV writing business. It's one of the only ones in the world that is tailored just towards salespeople. And when I started that, I didn't want to do what every single resume writer or recruiter does in the world, which is just use my subjective experience to tell me what the perfect sales CV needs to look like. I wanted to use science and data. So I ran two studies. The first study was with 4,000 sales leaders, and we asked those 4,000 sales leaders what the top 100 pieces of content they wanted to see on a sales CV was, and they told us the same 29 points every single time. So we knew exactly from that study what people want to see from a content perspective, and that is what episode one is about. We worked with a visual scientist, which is visual science is the study of anything visual, how we read, basically, the eyes and the brain read and retain information. And we worked with a visual scientist from a US university and ran a whole host of studies with 2,000 recruiters and HR people to figure out exactly what visual elements of your template will help you and what ones will hold you back. So we tested everything. We got very meta with it. It was from fonts, colors, structures, language, writing styles, language styles, everything you can imagine. We tested it. And we came off the back of that study. I came off the back of that study thinking, the template is going to have a huge impact in converting applications to interviews. In reality, the content was the most important thing by far. So if you've got a CV and it's got great sales content on it, but you've got a horrible structure, you've still got a very, very good chance of getting an interview. But if you've got the wrong content or just missing content and the best structure and template in the world, you've not got a chance of hoping hell and getting an interview. The content is the king. That is the main thing. You're going to see so much information online talk about the structure and the template. The template does this, that, and the other. The template will increase your chances only a little bit. The content could take you from 0 to 100% conversion rate immediately. So the content is the main thing. If you've not listened to episode one, check out episode one, because that's where I go through all the 29 pieces of content that you need to include in the perfect sales CV. But we're going to go through the template today and what that needs to look like. Just before I start reeling off what some of those important parts were, I'm not going to go through the whole study. I'm just going to come up with the main results of what we found, because otherwise we'd be here all day. And one of the things I just wanted to say was that people ask me all the time, Dave, how important is a CV? Or CVs dying, CVs are dying, yada, yada, yada. Well, I disagree with that. And we tested that as part of the study as well. We tested video, we tested audio, we tested imagery, all the different ways that you could get someone's experience to be transferred from them into the reader or the hiring manager or whoever's handling recruitment. The CV comes up top trumps every single time. And there's a scientific reason for this, and that is because the human brain is incredibly efficient at digesting the written word. And the written word, you can digest someone's experience within seconds using the written word. And even though video and imagery and audio is more creative, the problem is it's incredibly inefficient. So in a world we live in where most of the people reading your CV who are going to be recruiters, HR people, 95% of the time, probably 5% of the time they're going to be hiring managers, 95% of the time, those people have got hundreds, if not thousands of CVs to get through a week. Do you think they're going to spend that time watching hundreds of hours worth of video? No. They're going to spend seconds reading through something, because that is the most efficient way of downloading content into your brain. So while LinkedIn is very, very important for people to find you from a headhunting perspective, and that's something we'll talk about another time, the CV from making applications is still, and I think is going to stay, it's going to keep on standing the test of time. And it was Leonardo da Vinci who invented it, 600 or 700 years ago, whenever it was, and it stood the test of time that long. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, because it stood the test of time because it's so efficient. So it's still incredibly important. It's not the be all and end all. There's multiple facets of job hunting that you need to do, but the CV is the foundation of all of it. Getting a good CV will help you no end. I've read 10,000, maybe 20,000 sales CVs, and most of them are total hot garbage. And I cannot tell if you are right for my CV, my role or not. I get other CVs which have got the worst template humanly possible, where I've literally, I'm not afraid to admit this, opened up a document and closed it before I've read a word, because it is so ugly to look at that my brain, knowing it's going to read through 10,000 other CVs, goes, nope, straight away. So what we're going to talk about today is to make sure that no one opens your CV up and goes, nope, straight away. We want to make your CV easily scannable. No one's reading your CV. People are scanning quickly. They've got too many CVs to get through. They are not reading in detail. A hiring manager will read in more detail, but most of the time, a hiring manager is not reading your CV first. A hiring manager's got a bit more time because they're only going to review a couple of CVs, a few CVs a month, maybe. The recruiters and hiring HR people, the ones who are reading your CV most of the time, have got so many to get through. They're just looking to see if you fit the criteria of their job description 90% of the time. Is it a perfect system? No, it's not perfect, but it's the system that we have got. Another question I get often is, the ATS systems have got AI and they're filtering out my CV, yada, yada, yada. At this moment in time, that your CV is being read by a human being. So don't believe that crap when you see that. It's a human being who's reviewing your CV. There's actually a law in the US, I'm not sure if there's one in the UK, but there's a law in the US that says that the human being has to review the CV. That being said, I do think that may change at some point in the very near future. So that makes your structure less important and makes the content even more important. And I have a feeling that CVs are actually going to get longer because the only reason they need to be shorter and condensed at the moment is because of the limitations of a human eyes and brain to download that information. If you free a human up, I think you'll see CVs with way more information on them as time goes on. So I actually think they might go the other way. We'll have longer CVs as time goes on and AI is implemented. But for now, it's a human being who's going to be reading it. So we want to make it as easy as possible for a human being to scan your CV quickly, take out as much information as possible, and retain that information in a short period of time as possible. One of the things that we tested in the study was the amount of time that people read a CV for. You'll see people talk about, no one spends more than 6 seconds. I'll tell you from my own experience, I've spent less than 1 second reading a CV. If I can see someone's immediately irrelevant, they don't get a second from me. But if someone's very relevant, they'll get a lot more time. And that's what we found out from the study. Depending on the relevancy of your content in the CV will determine how much time someone spends on the CV. That being said, what you want to try and do from a visual perspective is create a template which makes it easy for someone to digest within seconds. Because a lot of the time you're dealing with people, like I say, who've got too many applicants to go through, and they will go through your CV very quickly. You want to set it up so it's made for those people rather than the people who spend more time on it. Another reason for that is that most people who do recruitment or HR, we've got ADD of some sort. That's why we're in this job. We're not spending that much time reading what you're doing. So the more that you can make your CV efficient at getting information from that piece of paper into their brain, the better. And that's what we found. That's what we tested with in that study using the visual scientists, was all of those areas that will help facilitate that efficiency. So let's talk about them in a little bit of detail. So number one, one of the most important things was keeping it simple. Keep your CV simple. I get so many CVs with wacky colors, grading systems, graphs. You wouldn't believe it. No one is winning an award for graphic design. Maybe a graphic designer will. You're in sales. No. You just want to keep it as simple as possible. Black and white, chronological, simple. That's how the human brain is efficient. Now, if you've got lots of different graphics and colors, it makes it much more difficult for the brain to read something quickly. The grading systems are horrible. Personally, and also we found out from our testing that they were super inefficient. They look bad. They don't tell me anything that I need to know. And they also just make you look, okay, so your communication skills are a 5 out of 10, but you're telling me your CRM skills are a 1 out of 10. Brilliant. You've just told me that you're horrendous at CRM. I don't need to know that. That is not how you want to be portraying yourself on paper. So no funky colors. I see some colors where they're highlighted in luminous pink, and it's just like, what are you doing? It makes it that I cannot read what you're doing quickly, and it just looks ugly. And we found that out with the testing as well. Simple layout is the most efficient, almost to the point where it is boring, stark boring. It just needs to be built for efficiency, not for winning graphic design awards. Okay. So it just needs to be functional. In terms of fonts, we tested every single font. Times New Roman and Arial had a 1% better conversion rate than almost every other font. So, either one of those two is fine. In terms of the structure, I'm going to say something that's is surprising to a lot of people. This is how the structure needs to look. At the top, name and contact details. Then a little area in terms of key skills. Then after that, you've got company one, your most recent company, chronologically, first company, a short description on that company, your responsibilities and your achievements. Rinse and repeat. Company description, responsibilities, achievements, rinse and repeat for all of your roles. And at the bottom, you've got your languages, CRM skills, and your education at the bottom. That was the structure that had the best conversion rate. The only caveat to that is that if you're working in a sales field where your education is very important, maybe in engineering or medical of some sort, where your education is actually linked to the product you're selling, get the education at the top. Same if you're in America as well. US CVs and resumes, and Australia was the same. Converted better if the education was at the top. In the UK, typically education it holds less value here. So it at the bottom was fine. But education at the top, if you're outside the UK, education at the bottom, if you're in the UK, unless your field dictates that your education is very important. So just chronological. And one of the things you're going to notice is, where's the personal summary? Well, from our testing, the personal summary, we used eye tracking software to have a look at what people were looking at, and 95% of readers didn't even bother reading the personal summary. And the more that they read CVs, the less they looked at the summary. Now, that was very interesting because, and I think there's a reason for it. It's a term called banner blindness. And I think the problem is that everyone in the personal summary puts exactly the same thing. I am a highly driven and ambitious sales professional with X amount of years, It's the same jargon, generic, I'm a passionate salesperson malarkey that you get in every single one. So at this point, it looks like people aren't really reading them. That being said, if you want to put it in there, it's not going to do any damage. It was just a waste of space we found from a real estate on paper perspective. So we personally don't put them in there. This is what people will say, oh, it's a good opportunity to show your personality. This is another thing that we tested in terms of narrative styles, in terms of writing styles. People will go on about, I want to see personality from a CV, or the data says otherwise that we checked, that we tested. Narrative styles of people showing personality converted the worst in terms of writing styles. At the end of the day, people are not making assessments of your personality based on one piece of paper. That would be ludicrous. That would be totally ludicrous. That's why we have interviews. If someone is making a personality judgment from a piece of paper, we wouldn't have the interview, just hire them straight away. We don't do that. So some people will say, oh, I want to see someone's personality from it. Okay, well, everyone's got the same personality on paper. Like, you can't make a personality judgment from a short personal summary. And if you type in and if you use the first person a lot, I did this, I believe in this, my values are this, that, and the other, it ruins someone's ability to scan your CV quickly. The style from a language perspective that works the best was a factual style, factual and professional, that used actually as little language as possible and spoke almost never in the first person. So just a factual language style is what works the best. And that is probably one of the main reasons why the personal summary wasn't really converting very well. Font sizes, headings size 14, main text in 12. They, were marginal gains on font sizes. It really didn't matter that much. In terms of, this is an interesting one, is hobbies. Hobbies was a very difficult one to test in the study. Some people will tell you, no, don't put them on there. Okay, listen to those people. This is one of those times where I'm going to bring my own experience in and say, personally, for me, I think you should put it on there. It's not going to hurt. Having 3 or 4 extra words isn't going to help. And in fact, I've had experiences of where the hobbies have actually had quite a big impact. For example, I once worked with a candidate who practiced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I sent him over to a hiring manager who also practiced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and people who are in that community, really gravitate towards each other. That was a major factor in him getting in front of him, because he knew that someone who's done Jiu-Jitsu, their mindset was exactly what they were looking for in sales. So the hobby there was a huge part of it. These small little details can have an impact on your CV. I mentioned in the first video, I talked about the Pantera shirt that my girlfriend saw on Hinge on our dating app. She wasn't liking my dating profile at all until she saw a shirt by a metal band called Pantera. And she decided to message me because of that one shirt. That one small detail made all the difference. So I would say that's what the hobbies can do for you as well. People who support the same football team, they like other people who don't support who also like the same football team. Likewise, if it's a rival team, it creates some, a bit of an interesting rivalry and banter between two people. So, it's up to you whether you want it on there or not. Personally, I do put it on there because I think it can help, and it very rarely doesn't help, So here was an interesting piece of information from the visual scientist in terms of how people read. So people read in something called the F zone. So the F zone is just an F. So people read from left to right, and then they start from left to right, they go back, down, and then left to right, and then down, left to right. So they read in an F, basically, or an E if they kept on going, and going. So people read in an F. So people read from left to right. What that means is that you need some information to the left-hand side margin, and then a bit more information. The biggest factor that was detrimental towards the CVs by far, and this was the one that even if you've got the great content, this could ruin your chances, was having a big block of paragraphs of CV, and that is what puts me off CVs personally, is the human brain cannot read that much information. It cannot download that much information. If it looks like Lord of the Rings, the brain immediately gets overwhelmed, especially when they've been reading a lot of CVs in one day. It needs to be broken up. And we're going to talk about breaking up the text quite a lot here. And the F zone is a big part of that. People read from left to right in short snippets, short bursts. A whole big block of text. In some cases, we tested over 50%. It ruined the chances of applicants by over 50%, because all of the important information is buried in there. People are not, they're scanning. They can't scan big blocks of paragraphs, and all the interesting, relevant information gets completely lost in that text. So you want to write in what is called the F zone. That is how people read at the end of the day. And that helps with eye strain. It helps with mental fatigue. And it stops them from getting overwhelmed, basically. So what else can you do to break up the text? So what you the key is to keep the brain and eyes fresh, so they're not reading the same type of text over and over, because that's what gives the eyes mental fatigue and eye strain. So the F zone, big part of it. Bold text to highlight key points, bolding, some bold, some not bold. Same for italics for subtle emphasis. Helps break up the text. Line breaks, actual line breaks create breathing room. Bullet points, massively important. Bullet points for concise information. Headings and subheadings to break up sections. And different font sizes for the hierarchy and different elements of the structure. So all these different elements can help you break up the text. Okay? It's quite funny because people talk about how long should my resume be? Well, if you had a resume that was 5 pages, but it had perfectly been broken up in text, you'd read that much quicker than 1 page of just pure block of text. So the length argument is kind of irrelevant, because depending on how someone has set up that CV structure is going to have a huge impact on its readability and your ability to read through it quickly. So don't worry about, I said this in the first episode, don't worry too much about resume length. This was something that we tested time and time again. If your CV, is relevant, you can make it as long as you like. That doesn't mean you have to make it 10 pages long. You don't have to make it 10 pages long. But don't worry too much about the length. Someone is not going to discount you. If you've got a hyper-relevant CV, no recruiter in the world is going to discount you from that job if it's hyper-relevant for that role, if it's 4 pages long. They will, however, discount you completely if it's 1 page and it's completely irrelevant. So the main thing is, like I said at the beginning, which is the content is the king by far. But when it comes to the length is even less important than the structure, how it looks visually. 1 page of block text is way less efficient and horrible to read than 3 pages of beautifully broken up text. So it's not about the length, it's about the content and the structure of the template. Okay. So another really, probably the biggest interesting find we had from this study was the use of different types of language, and where you want to use verbs and nouns and everything like that in terms of language. The typical recruitment and resume writing advice is that you want to start with a power verb at the beginning of a bullet point. And we tried that. What we actually found is if you started each bullet point with the key noun or a key noun phrase, that heavily influenced somebody's ability to scan your CV quickly. It was a huge difference in people's ability to read and retain that information. And there's a scientific reason for this. When recruiters have a role that they're recruiting for, they have specific requirements. So for sales, let's just say product experience is one of them. You must have X amount of years of product experience selling this product. All right. So when they're looking at a CV, they're looking for the product experience. Now, the key noun phrase of your product experience, let's say you've sent, I've sold paper towels for 15 years, this type of towel, that type of towel, this type of towel. The key noun there is product experience or product sales. So when someone is reading your CV, they immediately, at the beginning of each that bullet point, it's like a laser pointer. Oh, that's the bit where the product sales are. That's the product bit that I need to get to. Instead of having to search through the whole CV, my peripheral vision will automatically take me to the product sales key noun at the beginning of the bullet point. And then if you put that key noun in bold with a colon after it, it helps it stand out even more. So the key nouns at the beginning of the bullet points was one of the biggest things that we found that helped readability, which almost goes against all of the resume advice that you see out there. It's always verbs, power verbs. Well, it was a huge difference when you had the key noun because it acts as that laser pointer. Another way to increase readability is white space. So leveraging white space effectively. White space is any area of a CV that is left unmarked. So this could be the margins, gaps, sections, spaces between lines and words. You want to be able to use a good amount of white space to break up the text as well. So this is going to get a little bit in depth here, but margin wise, you want to keep them about 1 inch to 0.75 inches to the left. That's where you want to be. And the line spacing, is between sort of 1.15 to 1.5 centimeters. That's generally what worked the best, but it was marginal gains. What you don't want is it all crammed in together. You need to have a bit of space to breathe. So white space was massively important. Another big factor is something called the hot potato effect. A lot of resume writers I see out there use templates which have induced something called the hot potato effect that you want to avoid. If we go back to the F zone space that we were talking about, like people read from left to right. Now, if you've got information on the left, that means you want to keep all information on the left-hand margin. If you then have information on the right-hand side, so let's just say the dates that you work for a company, so you've got all the company information on the left and you've got the dates that you've worked there, it forces the eyes to go from left to right, left to right, left to right. It makes them flip from left to right, over and over, back and forth. What that means is that information in the middle, which is the key information, gets lost because people's eyes are moving to and fro the left and the right-hand margins. That is called the hot potato effect. And important information is lost when you do that. So keep everything over to the left-hand side margin, no information on the right-hand side on its own in the middle of space there. That is to avoid the hot potato effect. So in terms of language styles, just going back to that, like I said earlier, professional style, factual style. Write in the third person, don't use pronouns, remove as much fluffy and generic language as possible. Keep it clear and factual and professional. That was by far what converted the best. If you start talking about my belief in sales is this and that, and I have values that are da-da-da-da-da, or telling it like a story, it's just too fluffy. And we found it was an issue for people reading in our studies as well. The factual information, while it seems robotic and lacks personality, it is what gets the information to the reader the fastest. One of the things that is important on the template and structure is it's sort of linked to the content really, is how to avoid being discriminated against. People will discriminate against you when they're reading your CV. It will happen. As much as we want to say that it doesn't, people do have unconscious biases. To ensure that you avoid any discrimination, avoid having a photo. Even if you're a hot young blonde, avoid putting the photo on there because It could be a very jealous middle-aged lady who is reading your CV who might not want you in the office. So doesn't matter how hot you are, doesn't matter who you are, don't put a photo on there. It doesn't help at all. It does not help, and it opens everything up to discrimination. Avoid marital status. Avoid whether you're saying having kids. You know, in sales, people go, oh, they've got 3 kids, so they have time to travel for this sales role. Avoid it. Age, date of birth. Obviously, you know, it's difficult for you to hide how old you are if you've got 25 years experience. Ageism is, in my opinion, the most rife type of discrimination. It's the one we don't talk about the most, but it is the one that we see the most for sure. Just avoid your age and date of birth. Religious beliefs, political affiliations, ethnicity or nationality, your home address. Just put the town and the city that you're based in, or the city and the county or the state. You wouldn't post your address online to strangers, so don't do it on your CV. Disabilities and health conditions, sexual orientation, and non-professional social media links. None of them are relevant. None of that's going to help you get a job, so just leave it out. Okay, next one. This will be welcome news to you from advice that I absolutely can't stand. And it's given by recruiters who don't have to search for jobs. And it's given by people who've never even been in recruitment before or written a CV ever. And that is tailoring your CV to every single role. Again, this is more about the content and the structure. But you do not need to tailor your CV to every single role. Why? Because almost every single company that posts a job, that job description is not fully representative of that role. It's got missing requirements, hidden requirements, things they've not thought about. They've also got, a lot of the time they're lazy when they write them. So it's just been drawn up in 2 minutes, usually using ChatGPT. No thought or time's gone into it. They've got generic information in there. Those job postings are missing a lot of information. I know this as a recruiter because when I speak to a client for the first time, I will completely change that full job posting or what it looks like by sometimes 70, 80%, at least 25% each time, because I'm asking them questions they've not thought about yet. I'm giving them options they've not considered, and therefore it changes how they view the requirements of that role. And often the requirements, they'll put certain things in there which are must-have requirements. After I speak with them, they're not required anymore. They're not must-haves. They were nice-to-haves, maybe. So if you tailor it to a job posting that is got missing information or wrong information, it's not really going to help you at all. And I know that makes your job difficult because you're like, well, how do I know what to put my CV then? It's very simple. Listen to the first episode. All the content that needs to be on there is what all salespeople have agreed, 4,000 salespeople have told us they want to see. You just fill your CV full of all that information and you just use that one master CV. You don't have to tailor it every single time. That's going to save you a ton of time and a ton of effort. You don't need to do that. All right. If you're finding you have to tailor your CV massively to each role, you're probably lying about what you can do, because you shouldn't have to change your CV that much for each individual position in sales. It's not necessary. Now, that being said, if you're somebody who's a sales/operations person or a sales or marketing person, somebody who's done a sort of 50-50 split between two, have a couple of CVs, one that's more operations orientated and one's a bit more marketing orientated. Just have a couple of different versions. You don't need to tailor it every single time. And do not use tailoring AI systems. Do not use it, because it's going to tailor to a role that's got missing information and irrelevant information on it. It's just going to be crap tailoring to crap. And I think you all agree as a job seeker or anyone who's ever read job postings, they are crap. Companies cannot write them to save their life. They are generic and irrelevant, missing loads of information. So you do not need to tailor it for every single role. Just go through episode 1, or you can download our sales resume roadmap that's got all this information in there and just pack one CV full of it. Okay? When is a good time to use AI? Grammar, key noun placement, spelling, and some formatting. Okay? That's the only time you want to use it for your CV. Okay. So, this is another element of the CV that's not really part of it, but I recommend doing it, is references. Put your mind in the shoes of the hiring manager. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to hire the wrong person because it falls back on them and it's a nightmare for everybody. As hiring managers are usually quite anxious about making mistakes. The best force in the world that you can do at the beginning to ease someone's mind is reference from another sales leader who can give you social proof that you are as good as you're saying you are. Excuse me. Personally, if you can, I would send your CV with a couple of references attached as well. It has to be references from sales leaders, previous managers, not from Karen in customer services. It doesn't hold any weight. If you can back that up, I've seen references take people from, I don't want to hire this person, to I'm hiring this person. Literally, they've been that powerful. I've used references many, many times to get people interviews when companies said no. They're that powerful. Now, it's difficult these days to get references, but if you've got sales leaders who like you or customers who like you, they'll be happy to help you. Try and get a couple of strong references from ex-customers or sales leaders and send them along with your applications. So, I think that is more or less everything when it comes down to the structure of a CV. Now, like I said, we've put all this information into the sales resume roadmap, which is a free guide which tells you all the content and all these pieces of information that you need from a structure perspective to create the perfect sales CV. You can download that on my LinkedIn. You can download it on our Instagram. All the links will be in the description. And we'll put the website in there as well. But like I said at the very beginning, the main thing is the content. Don't stress and fret about this structure too much. The content is the main thing by far. We found that the structure, the perfect structure, really gave you a between 1% and 5% better chance of getting an interview. The content was 100% better chance. The only thing that is a must-have avoid in the content structure, the structure of the template, is big blocks of paragraphs. That was the biggest negative impactor of success, even with the right content. So, thank you for listening. This has been the You've Got Sales podcast. The next episode, I'm going to do some more sales advice, sales job searching advice generally. But thank you for listening, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye.